I'd like to give a big thanks to today's webinar sponsor, Strategex. Strategex is the premier 80/20 profit and growth consultancy, and they help major manufacturing companies achieve profitable market share growth. Next, I'll go over an introduction to each one of our speakers that are here with us today. David Philippi, our moderator, is the CEO of Strategex, where he's worked with more than 50 companies with 80/20 profit and growth initiatives. And to date, Strategex has delivered over $3 billion in operating income improvements to their clients in 10 years, thanks to large part to David's strategic vision, although he'd probably just tell you that it was all his team and his clients that did all of the work. We also have Kerry Baskins. He's the president and CEO of Peak Toolworks, where he implements 80/20. Prior to this, he used 80/20 to transform a stagnant company doing $70 million in revenue at a negative EBITDA. And under his leadership, they achieved over $3 million of run rate EBITDA in less than a year, doubled in the second year with a 60% increase in the third year. Plus, they transformed their employee motivation score from 25% to over 82% in 2 years. Don Kenny is the vice president at Franklin Electric and their president of North America Water Systems. He started with the company 31 years ago at Franklin Electric as an engineer for the fuel business and made his way to the VP of Franklin Fueling System. 6 years ago, he moved over to the water side of the business, which is the biggest segment of Franklin. And there he introduced 80/20 with huge success by eliminating complexity. And Andrea Hogan is the CEO of Fence Supply Group. In 2015, Andrea carved out a corporate orphan and applied 80/20 to the distribution and manufacturing sides of the business. EBITDA went from 2.6 million to 89 million in 6 years, and the business sold for 11 times invested capital. So thank you all for joining us today. And David, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you all for attending. I was given the task of giving an overview of 80/20 in 5 minutes. I'm not sure I'm going to do it, but really the purpose of this panel is to have you go down the journey of 80/20, ask the tough questions. We've gotten some great questions before, but just to level set and give you an idea of what 80/20 is all about, I'll give a 5-minute overview. If you want longer overviews, we've got videos on our website, strategex.com, where we do in-depth 80/20 discussions. But really where we start with 80/20, 80/20 is all about focus. And everybody's heard of 80/20. Everybody knows that 20% of our customers generate 80% of the revenue, and 80% of the customers only generate 20% of the revenue. But there's this third triangle, and that's where we spend our time, where we spend our effort. And what we found is the 20% of customers that are generating 80% of the revenue only require 20% of the cost, effort, SG&A, and overhead. And conversely, the 80% of customers that are only 20% of the revenue, they take up 80% of that effort, cost, overhead. And so if you were to draw a line down the middle, the north side of this chart is where you're making all of your money and then some. It's where all your growth potential is. And part of the reason that companies can't realize their true profit and growth is because of the amount of time they spend in the bottom half of this chart. So to give you some terms that you may hear during the panel, as we work at Strategex, we say, let's look at quartiles. And quartiles are very tactical. And basically what we say is give us a list of your customers from top customer to lowest revenue customer, descending order. And we break them up into 4 buckets, and that's why they're quartiles. So the top 25% of customers, what we always see is those generate 89% of the revenue. The next set of 25 customers, quartile 2 is 7%. Third quartile, 3%, and then 1%. And we see this, it's so common, it's on the back of our business card. Directionally, what we find is the amount of cost, effort, overhead, SG&A that goes to support each is tied to the quantity of customers, not the amount of revenue they bring. And so in each quartile, we find that companies are spending 25% of their time and effort on each quartile. The fourth column over here on the far right, this is the profit. With that top quartile of customer, you're making anywhere from 150 to 300% of your profit. In quartile 2, you're breaking even. Quartiles 3, you're losing money, and quartile 4, really getting shelled. Now, this is tactical. It takes your temperature. It lets you know if you're sick. And so quartiles are very tactical, as it just looks at either the customers. The same thing would be true for products. If you did your products in descending order, it would still be the 89731. But again, it's tactical. So to be more strategic, what we have to look at is quads. And quads now take the relationship of the customer and the product and how they buy. So you'll hear things in the panel today like quad 1 and quad 4. So I'm just briefly going to explain what that is. Here, we refer to the customers by their value. So the A customers are the 20% of customers that are 80% of the value, the critical few customers that generate 80% of the revenue. The B customers, or the 20s, are the insignificant many customers that generate only 20% of the revenue. So a really quick overview of the quad. Quad 1 here in green are our top customers buying our top products. We call that the fort because that's where you make all of your money. Quad 2 are your large customers buying small or low volume products, and we call that the necessary evil. It's highly strategic because these are supporting our top customers. Quad 3 are a lot of customers buying our top products, and we want to make that as transactional as possible. We want to minimize the resources, keep the revenue, but minimize the resources so that we can take those resources and focus them on more important things. And then in quad 4, we've got our low volume customers buying our low volume products, and all we know is that you can't realize a profit in quad 4. You can't realize a profit. We couldn't think of a name, but the acronym CRAP stuck, and so we call it the CRAP. Again, it's our low volume customers buying low volume products. So you might hear a little bit about quartiles and quads as we go through this. That's just to give you a brief overview of 80/20. At the end of the day, 80/20 is focusing on the most important things that are going to drive success for your business, for your life, for everything. And so hopefully I've done my job giving a brief overview, and now we can get to the 80 of this seminar, which is our excellent panel. And so some questions have been submitted beforehand that we'll start talking about. As we're going through it, if a question comes to mind, pop it up in the Q&A section, and we'll handle those at the end. We'll try to reserve 15 minutes. But we've pre-selected some of these questions that we thought were most important to those on this call. And so I'm going to stop my screen share here. And we're going to start at the beginning, so at the journey. And so as we do that, one of the questions we always get is, how do people know, they need 80/20? And so I'm going to go to my friend Andrea here. Andrea, we've done business for probably close to 10 years, 3 or 4 different businesses. But if you could, for the audience, can you paint a picture of what your company looked like before 80/20? What were your struggles? And how did you know you needed 80/20?
Sure. Thanks, David. When I arrived in 2015, what I saw was a low single-digit EBITDA business with a generally accepted mantra that performance was largely due to external forces that were beyond the business's control, like fickle end markets, volatile raw material costs, and undisciplined competitors. Those were the 3 biggies. And the strategy for growth, I always referred to it as the more strategy: more customers, more branches, more products in our basket that we can pull through to our customers. I saw consistently poor performance against too many under-resourced, high-priority initiatives and activities. I used to say, how can everything be a high priority? I saw a very reactive leadership team opening up email each day to see what the marching orders were. They used to refer to it, and we've all heard it, flavor of the month, flavor of the day. The business was, as they say, a mile wide and an inch deep, and just really not very important to any of their customers. The story I like to tell is I visited 50 of our top customers in my first 4 months, and one of them said to me, "I love you guys. You are great problem solvers." And I said, "Oh, thank you. That's great to hear. Just one thing. Who causes the problems?" And the customer said, "Oh, you guys make the mistakes, but you're great at resolving them right away." And it was at that moment when I began saying to the team, we want to be problem preventers, not just problem solvers. And that became an important pretext for why we needed to change.
That's a great point. I had a client that same thing, talked to their client, and they said, "You guys are really great at solving problems. The problem is there's just too damn many of them." So, so Don, over to you. I think we met about 2.5 years ago when I came down to present. Same question for you guys. What made you think you needed 80/20? What drew you to it?
Okay. Welcome everybody and good day. First off, I was in Franklin for 31 years, but in 2017, I came over to the water business. The fueling business was fairly streamlined. It was running pretty good. The water, however, was very complex. We had, as an example, we had over 2,000 SKUs, and this is just one of our small divisions, 2,000 SKUs, and we had over 1,000 customers. We had complexity with a matrix system. We had, what products are we going to build today? And you couldn't really set up a line and so on. We also had many different products from different companies that we acquired since 2004 that overlapped right on top of each other. So we had 3 or 4 products that were all the same. We were developing more products that were exactly the same. So what this did was really helped us reduce the complexity within the business. We reduced our SKUs by more than 30%. Our customer list went down by 43%. Our revenue has increased by 20%. And 20% may not seem like a lot, but that's been really just a year since we really implemented it. And everybody on this call knows what was going on this last year. So we were very fortunate because before we were losing customers, big customers. And how did we know we needed 80/20? I didn't. I just knew we needed something.
Yeah, and I think you explained the counterintuitive nature of 80/20 really well there. You said customer count went down, product count went down, yet revenue went up, and that's what we see time and again. So thank you. And Carrie, tell us a little bit about life before 80/20 and what 80/20 has done for you personally.
Well, I mean, I learned 80/20 and was introduced to it about 10 years ago. And prior to that, I spent like the first 22 years of my career carrying a bag on the commercial side. And so, I went into the first seminar with that bias in my brain that all customers are created equal. Every dollar of revenue is a potential commission. And, it was all of the same value. And it was interesting that first seminar, how the conversation was more about value and less about just what do you generate in revenue. But another kind of profound concept came from that seminar, if you will, and it was around the fact that as executives, we're incentivized to deliver value. And the person who presented to us was somebody who had actually retired in their 40s, deploying 80/20. And I was in somewhat awe of how he had done this. And he made a comment about how if you deliver maximum value against maximum incentives and you get rewarded handsomely, 80/20 will change your life. And we did a sort of a little exercise, my wife and I, not too long ago, and we added up from the Social Security website everything that we had earned in the first 22 years of my career, and then what we earned since 80/20. If you add up the first 22 years and compare them to the last 8 were 325% higher than the first 22 combined. And it has all been, every one of those companies has been 80/20. All of it has been incentivized around the results that 80/20 deliver. So for me, it's been life-changing.
Yeah, for me as well. I first learned about 80/20 of just over 15 years ago from the same gentleman, Johan. I think Johan kind of brings us all together. We've all been through his seminars. And when we talk about seminars, it's part of our 80/20 training and kickoff session where we explain it to our clients. So thanks, Carrie. One of the questions that we always get is, what were the difficult parts of implementing 80/20? And so Don, if I can go back to you, as you went to go and implement 80/20 at Franklin Electric, What was the biggest hurdle that you guys had to overcome getting this into the culture and actually implementing 80/20?
Yeah, with regard to what 80/20 did and what 80/20 was all about, forget about all the hurdles with the supply chain and with COVID not being able to travel. There was two real main hurdles that we had. One, we're trying to segment the business, and we're giving leadership to different people, and we're trying to get salespeople, technical people, and others within our business that really understood products, understood customers, to get them to be business unit managers and really look at the bottom line, not just at the top line. But I think our biggest hurdle was we're a matrix company. Manufacturing, finance, HR, they all report to different heads that all report into the CEO. And it was a real difficult venture working within that matrix system.
Great. So back to you, Carrie. Carrie, what were some of the hurdles? You've implemented this a few times. Was there a recurring big hurdle that you had to overcome?
This is one that shows up quite often, and it's really about overcoming those mental models and biases of legacy employees when you come in and you start to challenge the way the business has sort of been functioning over the last few years. We've learned a saying in 80/20, and we often say the data will set you free. And it's interesting that you get to a point where, like in my case, I'm a private equity executive. And so I will deploy into a business that might have been around 80 years. And you have employees that have been there 25, 30 years and have really got set in the way that business runs and the relationships with customers. And if you stand and argue with them anecdotally, you'll lose. But what's profound about getting to that 80/20 set of data is it sets you free because you're looking at this same source of truth, and you get to a point where you have to face the realities of the business of where money's made and lost. And it overcomes, but it's going to be a difficult moment for anybody, because that's where the change occurs, is when you all are looking at that same piece of data, what we call true north. Yep. And you realize we got to go there, not where we've been going.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Other things that we've run into is what gets companies to where they are may not be what's going to get them to where they need to be tomorrow. So when you combine where you're going with the data, as you mentioned, it can be extremely powerful. So we did talk a little bit about Quad 4 in the introduction, and Quad 4 are those small customers buying the lower volume products. And so, Andrea, if I go to you, can you tell us about one of your experiences in dealing with Quad 4, what you did and maybe what some of the results were?
Sure. I want to start by saying I've had people say to me, oh, I know about 80/20. 80s are good and 20s are bad. And I just want to say out of the gate, 80/20 really isn't about good or bad. It's about the intentional alignment of the best customer and product opportunities with the available resources and service models at the right price. And when done well, it drives uncommon financial results. Now, having said that, I will now contradict myself and say that Quad 4, when a business sells non-core special products to non-core small customers at average margins, well, that is bad. Yeah. And you spend all this time making money in Quad 1 and you give it away in Quad 4. But what that means is it's a great opportunity. It's one of the first things that should change, and it poses very little risk to the business. One of our branch managers, so part of our business is branch distribution, he dug into the detail of Quad 4. It was 4% of his revenue. And when he really dug into it, the data set him free. What he saw was that when he looked at what he was selling and to whom, he realized that those transactions were largely in person, on demand, and time consuming, generating very few margin dollars. He was making money with bigger customers and giving it away in Quad 4. So he decided to eliminate on-demand counter business altogether by charging a substantial premium for it and encouraging customers to call and order the day before, promising that if they did that, they'd get in and out of our yard in 10 minutes. Then he dug even deeper, significantly raising the price on non-stock items to the smallest customer. He essentially eliminated quad 4. He recovered 20 person hours a week, which allowed him to improve service levels in the other quads and expand margins. And this is a really important point. While a handful of high-touch, low-revenue customers took their business elsewhere, the higher pricing and increased sales in quads 1 and 3 offset the revenue loss by 10 times.
I'm sorry, you said 10 times?
10 times.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's especially true in today's supply chain constrained market that, you know, servicing those low volume customers takes not only valuable human resources, but material and supply chain resources as well. So we're going to transition a little bit now and talk about adoption and implementation. And so, Andrea, if I can stick with you, how did your team reply to the 80-20 thought process, and how were you able to get buy-in?
So you've heard it already 3 times in this webinar that it really helps to start with the data and objectively demonstrate the imbalance in the business. So we started with quartiles. Even so, you do have skeptics, and this was also previously brought up, because the notions we have about customer service and innovation and first come, first serve, those ideas run deep. We start to learn them in kindergarten, like even before we're in business. I had a longtime employee say to me, "I understand what you're saying, but I fear you will shrink us to greatness." And of course, you know, we took revenue in the time period from 260 million to 500 million last year. So that wasn't the case. But we generated buy-in in 2 major ways. First, we demonstrated that our top 2 performing business units, the ones that reliably produce the best financial results year after year, were in fact doing a version of 80-20. They didn't know it had a name, but those leaders focused on their top 20 customers. They went deep, winning an outsized portion of wallet share at the expense of smaller customers or adding new customers. Did the same thing on the product side. Then we asked for a volunteer at one of our lowest performing business units, and we ran an 80-20 pilot in that location. The name of the game in that pilot was change management, being sure to equip every single person in the organization with the information, the tools, the what's in it for me that they needed to make the change successfully. In 90 days, we grew that location's backlog by 100%. In 6 months, the location moved from the bottom quartile for performance to the top. And since all of our branch managers are on the same incentive compensation program, everybody understood that Greg, our branch manager, was going to be a top tier earner. Once we put all that out for the rest of the organization to see, locations were lining up to be next. We likely went slower than we could have, but change can be de-energizing, and with 40 locations, you encounter 40 cultures. But here we are with 80-20 deeply embedded in everything we do.
Yeah, what I really love about that is you gave them the purpose up front, right? And what you said throughout it is it's all about growth. And that's one of the misconceptions of 80-20. People think it's about downsizing, where I think you mentioned, cutting, and really what it's all about is how do we grow the business profitably. So thank you. And Don, going back to you earlier, you mentioned the matrix structure as being one of the challenges. So how did you overcome that obstacle? What were some of the benefits of applying 80-20 to a matrixed organization, and how were you able to get that buy-in?
Yeah, thanks. Let me just start out a little bit before that. When we brought 80-20 into the business, the first part of the matrix that we had to overcome was my own team, the commercial people. We went through value selling and many other programs, and they were very difficult to implement, and it really took a different kind of focus. This, I could tell early on that was going to be a huge success. So I needed to get my own team but to buy in on this. And that was a huge obstacle. It very quickly went away because what we did is we looked for a real fast win, a quick win.
Yeah.
When we got that quick win, everybody saw, this might work. And so then they really became part of it and really embraced it. And being business leaders, they had their own destiny in their own hands.
Yeah.
So then you go into the rest of the matrix. You got manufacturing and finance were the two that were probably the most difficult. And when I say manufacturing, I'm talking about the distribution side of it as well, right? So they have their way of doing things. They understand it. One factory does multiple product lines to multiple channels through multiple businesses within our company. So to get them to kind of streamline to the 80-20 look, we had to really go in and show them what we were going to do, and that is eliminate customers. We were going to eliminate SKUs so they had more shelving space. We had the customers that we did keep were going to be bigger customers, so it'd be less shipments with bigger loads. And it took a little bit of time before they had their shelves organized toward our customers and how we were delivering items. So again, it was a fast win for the manufacturing / distribution part of our business, and that really helped. On the finance side, it was, we were trying to take control over the credit and all of the aspects that control restrict our customers from being from growing with us, and that is credit limits and so on. And they really felt that they needed to keep their fingers on it, and we had to work with them, and it wasn't that difficult, by the way, but it really they had to get our confidence that we were going to really take a look, and we were going to be diligent with it. We were going to ask for help when we got behind. So the fast wins, I guess, is what I would say was I think it to almost anything. Get a fast win and you can implement it even within your own teams. So
getting that quick win got the snowball in motion, and then it picked up steam from there. And the other thing about segmentation is it puts control at the point of the spear, which is ultimately what we want. They have control over their own destiny, I believe, as you mentioned as well. So Carrie, as you've gone through this, you've been through it a number of times. What 80-20 tool in the toolbox have you found to be, most useful in your journey?
Yeah, so I mean, as Strategex has taught us, there's these 6 tenets of sort of going through the process, but you get to this one that really becomes transformative, and it's what we call the zero up P&L process. A great example of how to think about the zero up for me is, imagine going to IKEA and getting a box of parts where an extra 80% of parts have been thrown in the box and the instructions have been shredded. And you go home, you don't know a thing about, all you know is you're going to build this piece of furniture, and you throw everything out on the floor, and there's 80% more parts than you need. Many people will try to figure out, because it's all in the box, it all has value, it all has to go somewhere. How am I going to do this? Worst case scenario, you get this thing put together, and at least all these extra parts go in your inventory in your garage or something, right? But you have a tendency not to throw it away because it seems like it's of value, and it's going to be of value someday. What's interesting to me about the zero up process is, one of the first things that I learned was to stop thinking about fixed and variable cost, and to think of everything below that material margin line as variable cost, because you're picking that factory, you're picking that person, you're picking that machine to bring value to that part of the business that it's being assigned to. And so what the zero up kind of process really forces you to do is dismantle the whole company and put the pieces back together relative to what brings value. And I remember one of my instructors challenging me when we were bringing factory or people back into the equation. And they said, when we got done, you've put your business back together, and there's this big chunk of people and equipment and infrastructure sitting on the sideline. Why didn't you pick it? And as I explained why I didn't pick it, the question became, why did you keep it? And at the end of zero up process, you have these sudden, several hundred point steps in your gross margin and EBITDA, and you look back and say, my gosh, I lived with all these extra parts in my IKEA box for all these years. What was I thinking? And for me, it was always the zero up that made the whole organization kind of stop and stare for a second. It's very transformative.
Yeah, it really exposes where you make money, where you lose money, and where some opportunities for investment, for cost reduction, all these other things. So
Yep.
it happens to be one of my favorite tools as well. So Andrew, if we go back to you, can you give us an example of a big change that you made due to the 80-20 thinking that was really a shock to the organization system?
Sure, I'm actually just letting Kerry's story sink in. That was great. I might have to use that one. I love that analogy. My favorite change was one we did almost immediately back in 2015. Because of the previous owner's more strategy, they were incentivizing the sales team to set up new customers and to sell new product categories. The company was reference checking and extending credit to 70 new customers a month, 70 new customers a month. We had 4 credit managers that spent 60% of their time setting up new customers. So we went to the data, and the data told us that over the past year, 81% of the new customers set up never purchased anything after the first purchase, 15% never purchased anything at all, and only 4% purchased more than once. It was a terrific example of a lot of time and resource application against a non-value producing initiative. It was like banging our heads against the wall. It felt so good when we stopped doing it. We immediately sat down with the sales leaders and said, how could we better spend this time and effort? And when we do set up a new customer, what should the criteria be? I mean, we want to, so I'm not saying you set up a new customer, but let's be particular. The end result was we reduced new customer setups to less than 5 a month. And in each case, those customers met our minimum requirements for addressable spend, proximity to our location, payment history, et cetera. 100% of those new customer setups became repeat customers. We then refocused our credit managers on partnering with our biggest customers, helping them become better cash managers, and of course, collecting the money. Our credit department went from being called the business prevention department to one of our top sales tools. They're the most beloved department in the company. Our customers love our credit department because we help them grow their business, and they're super engaged. So, first 3 months in, we went from 70 new customers a month to about 5, and it really worked.
Yeah, and it's especially important. You mentioned the resources. Our labor shortage issue here, especially in the U.S., and that's not going away anytime soon. And so, what 80-20 really helps you with is where should we put those limited resources that we have? Mm-hmm. So we're going to segue a little bit now and talk about some of the lessons learned. I think a lot of people had a lot of questions around, okay, what were some of the learnings that you had? And so Don, as we go through this, I know that as the first group of business divisions that you took through 80-20, they've done really well. How do you now transfer that knowledge and these best practices to the next group as they go through this process for the first time?
Sure. Let me start out with the first segmentation, that we went through 80-20 with was a stepchild. We acquired the businesses. We really didn't invest in it. We really just let it run for cash, and we also believed it was the least profitable business that we've had. And so we thought, okay, there's no harm done if this doesn't work out. So it was, we're going to do it with this particular business. And we did it, and we found out first off, zero up was mentioned before. The zero up really showed that, this is a pretty profitable business. We just need to pay attention to it. We need to pay attention to our big customers, because literally 6 months before that, we lost one of our biggest customers because we were not paying attention to them. Hopefully we get them back, But our other large companies that we really said we have to pay attention to, we have to treat them differently than the other companies. They all have, gave us big hugs because they have complimented how we're doing so well, even during the pandemic and during the supply chain issues and so on. Transferring it to the other businesses, which were where we really focused and we really had customers that every customer, literally every customer, sorry about that, but when I don't move in my office, my lights go off. Anyways, every customer is important, which is somewhat true. So it's a little bit more difficult bringing it into a more developed business than one that we really weren't paying attention to. But what we're doing is we're bringing that first group of people with us. We're bringing them in so that they can share their stories. Next week we have training, and they're going to be doing some of the training, and they're going to be doing some of the examples of what it is that it brought to them. And then we have others that are going to be showing, here's similar issues that we have in these other divisions. So we're not quite there yet, but we believe it'll be much easier because we had the small wins in the beginning, and now we have a really nice win with results of a complete business.
Great. Excellent. So Carrie, looking back, if you could change one thing as you went through 80/20, what would you change as you went through 80/20 implementation?
Well, the question often comes up about ERP systems, and sometimes people believe they have to have an absolute ironclad, ERP, my perfect data, if you will. And that's really not the case, but you have to have a source of data that at least you can trust. And I think, for us, in one engagement, when we were trying to work on a business, we had really poor standard costing in our system, which impacted the look into our margins. And so I would have, rather than jumped full on into what we were doing, I'd have backed off for just a second. I'd have tested my standard costing and made sure I really trusted my product level margins, and then we'd have had it on down the road. So we had one instance where we kind of had to backtrack and get that right and then go, but then you kind of get a big win because your data is that much more powerful.
Yeah, so it's a data-driven process. So the data's got to your point, directionally correct before you can start making decisions. If your data is not good, you're really running with scissors because you don't know what to do. So
that's right.
Point there. Andrea, you've done this, multiple times. What would you say the most common misconception about 80/20 is?
That's easy. Two things come to mind. A lot of people think it's about firing customers or that it's not customer centric. I can just tell you, it's the most customer centric program I've ever executed. And it to all the customers, right? You over deliver the promise. It's just that the promise has to be different. It can't be the same proposition. Our customers love us and our targets want to be in the club. If resources were unlimited, maybe a business could do everything it wanted, could be everything it wanted to be to all customers, but resources are limited, so choices have to be made. I think another misconception is that other very successful businesses don't do it. I mean, we choose not to recognize things like frequent flyer programs. I mean, that's 80/20, right? I'm a 100,000 mile per year flyer with American Airlines. I get on the plane first. I always have room in the overhead. And by the time they board group 7, I've had a drink and a nap. And so we see 80/20 all the time. We see companies saying, this is my service model, order here, pick up here. And as customers, we do it. So yeah. I think the misconception is that it's not customer centric and that somehow we're doing something bad if we're really explicit with customers about how we want to engage with them.
Yeah. Don, Carrie, anything that you've seen as a common misconception?
Yeah, other than go ahead.
No, Don, go please.
Okay. Other than the customers, I agree completely with what Andrea said. as far as product lines go, you have so many salespeople, so many people that say, if I don't have that, I'm not going to be able to sell all of this profitable stuff. I have to have the loss leader. And there's some truth to that, but there's a lot of false to it as well, because the reason I say that is because we can't deliver them those one-off, the secondary products, because on time when they need it. So if we can get them to be buying the A products, as we call them, we can get it to them on time, we can get it to them higher quality with a lot more service and so on. So I'd say the product rationalization, it's not eliminating products, it's providing better products with better services to your customers.
That's a really good point. It really is about shifting the demand to something that actually works for them better. So,
right.
Kerry, you were going to say something, or?
Well, I was just going to add one of the big lessons I learned too is you can't dabble in 80-20. Oftentimes people will say they'll get enough to be dangerous and they think, okay, I'll just look at the Pareto and I'll go make some decisions. And we've learned it's a Rubik's Cube. You could make some decisions about your customers and still have some ridiculous, unrationalized product situations going on. You could go try to get more share of wallet and realize none of those customers are raving fans and they don't even believe in your company yet.
Right.
And what's nice about a holistic approach, and I want to emphasize, 80-20 isn't an initiative, it's a culture shift, right? You're deciding that you're going to adopt a new language in the organization, a new approach, and it's going to govern how you run the business, how you introduce new products, new customers, everything is going to go through this lens. And when you get to that point, you're no longer dabbling, you've made that change. And so my biggest piece of advice is, if you decide to do this, literally surround yourself or get somebody close to you who's done it before, who can encourage you through the journey to stick with, the kind of 6 most important pieces of it, so that you get it all the way to the end. And you'll totally see what I mean when you got the Rubik's Cube all in the right colors. That's when the business is at its maximum potential. But if you dabble, you could end up with colors scrambled.
Yeah, we say it's holistic, right? It goes across the whole organization. So,
yep.
Really quick, before we go to the live questions, Andrea, what advice would you give to someone that's considering an 80-20 journey? I think Kerry just said, get somebody who's done it before. What advice would you offer?
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is not so in addition to getting some help, people that can really help you through because they've seen it before, data is important. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but using data to change minds is great, and change management. This is not a do it because I said so proposition. What 80-20 is selling goes against very strongly held belief systems. So you got to have the data, the change management, and some really good support.
Yep. And Don?
Yeah, I would say, number one, you need buy-in. And you need buy-in from the leader that's going to be doing it, not just as an exercise, but that leader has to really be involved in it. It has to understand it, has to really be partake in it so that they know that you're there. But it also needs to have buy-in, I would even say at the CEO level. Not that the CEO has to be involved on a day-to-day, but there has to be a commitment from him that we're going to do it. And Kerry said it earlier, you can't dabble in it, right? You need to be committed, and you need to stay committed all the way through the process, because it's hard sometimes to see that you're going to be getting all this benefit, and it does come true, and it comes true really quickly all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So.
Great, thank you guys. So we're going to switch, and now we're going to go with some of the live questions and some of the questions that we got submitted as we put the webinar together. And the first one kind of goes to that misconception. And the first question that we get, and we get this a lot, is how do we keep offering what makes us special and sets us apart while still focusing on streamlining our product offerings? Don, you mentioned that a little bit. You want to take first shot at that one?
Sure. Everything you do is what makes you special, right? The products that you do makes you special, but changing over to having the right products, being able to deliver the products, giving high quality products to your customers, and the service that they get with these products is very important. And, you know, we learned through this process, it's really not the products that make us special. It's our company that makes us special. And as long as we deliver, and just, I don't want to take too much time, but we did VOCs, independent VOCs, and Strategex did them before we started the process. And it was unbelievable how we thought we were liked in the industry, and we weren't. And we did it shortly after, and it's unbelievable how things changed. Our customers are very happy with us, even though we're having troubles delivering through this pandemic.
Yeah, I think that ties in nicely to what Andrea said earlier about it really being a customer-centric program, and how you were able to flip that from customers didn't like us as much as they love us now after going through that process. Right. So, Andrea, anything to add?
Well, I think you really have to challenge people's views of what makes you special. I found in every business I've been in where I've done 80/20, what made us special was driving all the behaviors I wanted to stop. So I've learned to have a really great facilitated session about, okay, what do our customers expect from us? What do our employees expect from us? What do our owners expect from us? And gain great alignment on that, and then you can start from there. That's another great pretext for 80/20.
Great. Carrie, anything to add?
Well, I mean, everybody on this call who has a company that sells a product has a mathematical core to their business. And that core tells you very clearly from a data standpoint, where do we really, like, what do our top customers really buy from us? And it was interesting in my current business, once we did the deep dive and went through zero up P&L, we realized our core wasn't positioned correctly. It was actually what most people wanted, but we weren't making money doing it. It was a very interesting insight. And so we had to change our thinking around what the core of our business really was.
Yep, thank you. And another question came in, and it said, you know, how does the 80/20 concept apply to a manufacturer that is very transactional, builds long-lived products for end user customers, though not a car dealership? Think of a dealership that builds the vehicle, but sells it to individual John and Jane Does, not multi-unit buyers. You know, as I think about this one, and don't mean to put you on the spot, Andrea, but, you know, knowing some of the businesses that you came out of where it was very transactional, you want to take first shot at answering that one?
Well, I think you have to figure out who your 80s are, or what the 80s are in the business. You know, I had a CFO of another PE-owned business say, "Oh, you're the 80/20 person, and I don't buy it." And I said, "Well, okay, why don't you buy it?" And he said, "Well, we run big paper converting machines, and we only make money in the 23rd and 24th hour that they run every day. And if I eliminate any customers and that machine's not running, I'm going to lose money." And I said, "Well, then that's your 80. That's the single most important thing that you've got to drive." And then from there, I think a zero up would be a great exercise in that scenario, if you will. I don't know if I answered that specific question, but that business has to really understand, where do I make money? Maybe on what models? Maybe we can, you know, limit the number of specials that they do, or like the word escapes me, you know, modifications that people could make.
Yeah, so sometimes we say going from engineered to order to configured to order, right? Something like that. And, you know, I think what you hit on there is every 80/20 engagement is different. The 80 is different at every different company. And so 80/20 is not so inflexible. But we go and we say, look, the 80 could be the product more so than the customer. Sometimes it's the customer more so. Sometimes it's the process. It can be anything. Don, anything to add there?
I think, we have businesses that have both transactional type businesses and then also the non-transactional. And I'll just put a little different spin on it. I think you need to be able to do both within your operations. And the first one we did, we want more transactional type businesses for the customers and the products that we don't sell a lot of and don't sell a lot to us. So we do mainly serial type manufacturing, so it's difficult for me because the customers is not really, like as Andrea said.
Yeah, great. So another question that came in is, how can you start to introduce 80/20 in a long history of family ownership with a culture that is old, cold, and hostile? So Carrie, I'm going to give you the chance to answer that one first.
Okay, so that just described about every legacy industrial business you ever walk into as an outsider, right? And this is just a tremendous example of where you can't unless you have the data in front of you, right? You're going to lose every time having an anecdotal discussion with legacy leadership who has an emotional attachment to everything in that business. And once you run the data and you show the data, it becomes a math problem and the data sets you free.
Yeah, and I think finding out what the goals are of the family. I mean, if they're motivated to make more money, that would be very helpful.
Yes.
If they're not, if they're fat and happy and everything's okay, then whoever asked that question, maybe you could circulate your resume or something.
So I think you're right, and I think Carrie hit on it. If you want to start, just go get the quartiles. The quartiles will suspend disbelief. So just start getting the quartiles, and I always love it when I go to talk to a client. If they've run the quartiles, I know I've got them because they see it and they feel it. So I think that was great advice. Another common question that we get is, what does an unsuccessful engagement look like? Or said another way, other than leadership commitment, what is the 80/20 Pareto for not having a successful 80/20 process implementation? And you guys have all been successful, but maybe talk about some of the things that you've seen that hasn't worked in your experience and go through that. And just because I saw Carrie nodding the hardest, I'm going to go to him first.
Okay, well, look, again, it's that whole concept around dabbling in 80/20. That's one, but I also think it's important to make the point. Back in the sort of 90s, if you will, which is when I started coming into the business world, Six Sigma was a huge initiative at that time, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember that we always picked the best and the brightest to be the Six Sigma black belts to really drive change in the organization. And Six Sigma is a grind because you're really digging into a lot of data and you're changing the way things are done. The same goes with 80/20. This is a tremendous opportunity for your high potentials to get involved in the business and to drive a piece of the business that's going to bring around real value change. And so, one of my big pieces of advice is, if you want to be successful, put people in charge of these tenants that are really committed to it and really drive a lot of personal value in being successful in those areas. Put somebody in there who's going to fight all the way, and it's going to be like pushing a rope at times.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything to add to that, or?
I would just add that don't do it alone. 80. We have we're doing different. We're doing a smaller segment, and we're working on the bigger ones now. Our manufacturing side of the business did 80/20. They kept on coming back to me and saying, it's 80/20. I said, no, you don't understand. It has to be the whole business that you're going to 80/20 at one time. You have to have rationale for it. And get some expert to help with it. Like Strategex has helped us. It's expensive, but it's paid for itself over again. So 80/20 is not a simple process to do correctly.
Yeah. Andrea, any words there?
I would just add that having some basic measurements, we started to implement 80/20, started to train people on it. We did some things, but when it really got traction was when we were able to codify the 80/20 designations in our system, so that we could see how we were doing with our 80, our core products, our core customers. We could see that we were raising margins in quad 4 and all those good things. So that's pretty important. It's not a reason not to get going on thinking about it in your business, but it took us about a year to get it in the system, and that was a game changer.
Great. One last question before we run out of time, but we will feel free. I'll put up my contact information. If you have more questions, send them to me, email, I'll respond. But this is a question we get all the time, and it's, well, if you eliminate quad 4 and rerun the data, won't there always be a quad 4, right? And that's a question that we get. So, the end question is, so at what point do you start focusing on quad 4? So again, Andrea laughed the hardest, so I'm going to give her first crack at that one. And
look, it's like getting to the end of the internet. So when you rerun the numbers, you're going to have quad 4, and the hope would be that it's not crap anymore. It's something better than crap, but still not as good as quads 1, 2, and 3. And it's an iterative process. And what I tell our folks is, it gives you control. You are now deciding which products and which customers and how they move through the quads. And I want these customers to move this way, or these customers to move that way. So it's really the deliberate and intentional movement of products, processes, and people to the most advantageous spot in terms of the opportunity and the margin dollars. So you'll have quad 4, but it'll be a better quad 4. And the next time you run the numbers, it'll be even better than that.
Yep, great. I saw Dave come on, so I think we're out of time. I'm just going to share my contact information. I'll try and respond to all the questions in the webinar that we didn't get to. So if you want to stay on, I can do that. And then here's my email me, call me, happy to answer any questions that you might have. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
That was a fantastic conversation. So thank you, David, Carrie, Don, Andrea, and to Strategex. To everyone on the line, thank you for joining us today. A link for this recording and the slides will be sent to you tomorrow. And just remember to take a moment to fill out the short survey as you exit the browser. We appreciate your feedback. And again, thank you all for joining us today. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.